Good evening, everybody. This is Casper from the Tropical Weather Threat Society, bringing you our nightly update regarding the tropical basins. And we don't really have too much to discuss here tonight. The Atlantic Basin is quite quiet, which is, we are thankful for that. And this damn thing. I do apologize. I have not figured out this Facebook update that they have come up with. I'm just desperately trying to get into the chat here, but nonetheless, I can pull it up on a different device here instead of the other monitor on the computer. Let's see, did that work? No, it did not. All right, that's enough of that. Okay, taking a look at the overall basin, we still have two tropical storms on the board and a bunch of highlighted areas of interest out here in the eastern Pacific, but the Atlantic remains quiet. As we can see, Tropical Storm Fernand has not decided to come off the board yet and is actually strengthened over the last time that we discussed Fernand. As we can see here through the latest satellite imagery, it is beginning to start to succumb to some of that southwesterly shear, a lot of that dry air. It still has a little bit of convection, has not become frontal yet. So we'll still continue to talk about it, but I believe tonight will be the last night. I believe it'll be off the board by the time that we get to tomorrow night's live. So currently we're located at 39.3 north, 47.4 west, maximum sustained winds 50 miles an hour, moving east-northeast at 15 miles an hour with the minimum central pressure of 1,006 millibars. There are currently no coastal watches or warnings in effect, and there are no hazards affecting land. If we take a look at the overall discussion, as we could see here, within the next 12 hours, it is forecast to become post-tropical, and that could come as early as the 11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time advisory. If we take a look at the forecast cone, as you could see, we have nothing out there anywhere remotely close to it. The Azores are the only closest populated landmass, but it's not even coming close to them. If we take a look at the forecast guidance, this is forecast to move over towards western portions of Europe. So, United Kingdom potentially. Oh, good evening, Lisa. And Lisa's over there on the YouTube channel. That's the one chat that I can actually read. This is ridiculous. How it will not let me. Well, we'll just try to do it that way. It keeps popping up as a reel and not popping up as the video like it normally does. It's done it 2 nights in a row now. But as we can see, some inclement weather is headed towards the eastern or the northeastern portions of the Atlantic. For the Atlantic Basin, we currently do not have tropical cyclone formation expected over the next 7 days. That being said, this was released yesterday. This is the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. And as you can see, we do have some concerns as we go forward. We did go through the portions of the discussion last night. This valid week 2, September 3rd to September 9th, we have a 20 to 40% chance out here into the main development region of the tropical Atlantic. As we get into week 3, September 10th to September 16th. Now, this comes with some variabilities. Please understand that. There was some uncertainty that was made sure to be mentioned in the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook discussion that was associated with this graphic. But right now we have a 40 to 60% chance out here in the same area as week 2 of the main development region, with a 20 to 40% chance and in encapsulating or encompassing that area here somewhere between 10 and 20 north and maybe about 30 to 50, 55 west. Is where the highest opportunity for tropical cyclone development can occur. We also have this area here. I can't really get much signal on that being that far out. But here into the southern Gulf and the western portions of the Caribbean will need to be monitored. And folks, September 10th is the climatological peak of hurricane season. That is this point right here. That's September 10th. So once we get past the 10th, it'll start to very, very slowly wind down. And I mean very slowly as far as the season is concerned. But we've got a long way to go, folks. We've still got the second half of the season to go. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of look at our 850 millibars cyclonic vorticity. So what we're doing here is we're looking for areas of highlighted spin. We have the Euro on the left and the GFS on the right. If you notice here, let me get up here and get a circle down. This is what we look for. This is Tropical Storm Fernand. Now, if we see those types of signals in these deterministic runs, then we start to really check other factors, atmospherically, water temperature, and stuff like that, as, kind of in the area of the seed itself. So let's go ahead and run this forward. This is approximately 1 mile above the ocean surface. And we've got a couple areas, broad areas of spin coming off of the African mainland. Nothing too significant there. As we get into day 7, we start to see the Euro consolidating a little bit of energy associated with the intertropical convergence zone down here. And that begins to lift off to the north or the west-northwest, as to where the GFS does not agree with this at all. Now, the Euro and the GFS, as you can see here, has some areas of vorticity associated with a stalled out frontal boundary off the east coast of the United States. This is non-tropical. It will remain frontal, although we may see a 10-10 associated with it from the National Hurricane Center if conditions on the models were to change. Now, as we get all the way out here to the 240 hour, it almost stands out like a sore thumb, and it's kind of got a little highlight on it. This is the area of interest that it would be for week 3. This is the area of interest that would be for week 2 in the forecast. This model goes all the way out to September the 6th. Okay? So what we're looking at here, if we come back to this graphic, September 3rd to September 9th, we could be looking at that secondary one, but it is most likely the first area that we are looking at. If we look into the following week, September 10th through the 16th, and in this area here, that does line up with this particular seed 4 days down the road. That's when we could see a good signal for development in that region. So just to clarify what we're looking at there on the relative vorticity. Now we've got to match this all up. The sea surface temperatures. We definitely have sea surface temperatures well in the range of tropical cyclone development. So that is not a question. If we look at the atmosphere is a little bit of a different story. So we have the Euro are going to be the left 2 frames. The GFS will be the right 2 frames. Now, we have the 500 millibar level at on the top 2 frames and the 700 millibar level on the bottom 2 frames. You may ask what the 700 and 500 millibar levels are. The 500 millibar level here on this graphic represents approximately 3 to 3.5 miles above the ocean surface. The 700 millibar level represents approximately 2 miles above the ocean surface. So let's come back. And now that we're looking at areas, we're looking for the moisture and the humidity levels between basically 10 and 18,000 feet. That's what we're trying to determine, or at least get an idea of through these models. Now, as you can see, the top two really have a great amount of dry air around the 18,000 foot mark. We have dry air down at the 700 millibar level as well, but not as consistent and over like widespread and over encompassing the majority of the basin there like we have at the 500 millibar level. But if we continue to run this out, we will note that there still is dry air injections coming down from the eastern portions of the Atlantic and wave breaking into portions of the tropical Atlantic and dropping its dry air down there. Now, if we look, we do know that our seed from the Euro is right on the very end of the run, right on the very edge of the African mainland. Both models on the Euro show a considerable amount of dry air preceding or in front of the storm prior to its exit off the African mainland. Now, if we want to compare the GFS to what we have with the Euro, the GFS does have, does have a small signal there, but it is not as pronounced as what the Euro is showing. The Euro definitely shows something much more tighter and pronounced as to where, compared to the GFS is much more broad, wide, and, kind of over encompassing. Not necessarily would need to consolidate and, tighten its inner core to become a tropical cyclone. Now, it's not just, we need still winds in the atmosphere as well, or winds that are at least moving in the same direction and the same speed as the storm. So what we have here is our deep layer wind shear. We've got the Euro on the left and the GFS on the right. This is deep layer wind shear from the 200 millibar level, way up here, 39,000 feet, all the way down to 5,000 feet. So we're looking at the winds changing with height over, 7 mile period, 6-7 mile area is what we're looking into. So tropical cyclones do not like winds that change with height. And as we can see, we have a considerable amount of increased shear here across the Atlantic, across the main development region over the short term. Then that begins to subside some. And then we get our area of low pressure associated with the Euro coming out off of the coastline. Now, again, if we compare that with the GFS has this massive broad area of circulation that is a high pressure and anticyclonic circulation, which is turning clockwise. And at this point, that if we could get this little area of low pressure kind of embedded within that, then we may see quick development as it comes off of the coastline. Now, we don't see that low pressure or wave action here on the GFS, but we do on the Euro right here. And the Euro is also showing this anticyclonic, although it being very weak, rotation and counterclockwise rotation over this area that would be emerging from Africa. But here's the thing. We've gotten now to September the 6th. By the time we get out here, somewhere in this region where we're calling for, we're probably looking at September 10th, maybe give or take. Well, what about these frontal boundaries that keep coming through? If this storm is going to go north of these islands right here, being the Greater Antilles, the leewards and windwards here on this line, if this storm were to track north of this, because we are getting later and later into the season, there is signal that this could turn north and go out. But it is obviously, the storm is still 10 days from coming off the coast. So any type of predictive uh, is any kind of predictive ideas for this early? Absolutely not. So it's just we're watching how things materialize and what the steering patterns are overall, and whether this troughing feature is going to maintain itself. It looks like there's an ebb and flow to where it kind of pops back, disappears for a little bit, and then snaps right back. But again, it's so far out that you have to wait for run after run of consistency. So it's just too early for that. Looking at our legacy ECF or ECMWF, this is the Euro ensembles. And this goes all the way out 10 days already. Now, we've already determined through our seeds, looking at our vorticity, that yes, there is forecast to be a low pressure center along this frontal boundary, but it is non-tropical in nature. It is just another low pressure system. This area here would be considered tropical, but there's not a lot. There's a signal, but there's not a real heavy, thick congruence on it. There's not a large amount of the ensemble members that are showing some type of development. But there is certainly a signal there, and by the time that we get into this time frame, we do have a 20 to 40% chance of tropical cyclone development in this exact same area, highlighted from the Climate Prediction Center. Now, the one thing that the ensembles allow us to do is go into what we call fantasy land. And a lot of folks use Fantasyland to promote hype on social media. Well, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it looks like 15 days out. And as you could see, the steering flow, at least through this particular model run, does, for the few ensembles that do get it developed, does favor a turn to the north and potentially away from the United States. All right, now a more southerly track changes the angle some, but then again, you're looking at land interactions and two lines that represent 4% probability in an area and a timeline of a model that is absolute fantasy land. So what we're looking at is just the overall steering pattern. That's it. We're not looking at anything other than we see a little bit of a northerly turn with this. Now, this is obviously, not going to be factual when we get 15 days out. That's not what we're going to be looking at. But what it does show is that when we look back at this tomorrow, does it show the same signal? What about the day after that? What about the day after that? Are we showing a consistent trend signal? If so, that leads to a little bit more confidence in some of that longer range solutions, as long as everybody else is agreeing with it. Now, if we compare the Euro Legacy with the Euro AI, we see here going out the next 10 days, we've got the same type of signal here into the central portions of the tropical Atlantic. We have our non-tropical low feature running along the frontal boundary here off the United States. Now, again, what we're going to do is we're just going to push this out to its absolute fairy tale land ending. 15 days. Now, if we push this out 15 days, notice that we do get some that get it, a little bit concerningly close down here towards the islands. But please keep in mind this is Fantasyland. We're looking at fiction, okay? But the one thing that kind of points out is that on a couple of these ensembles, we have a little bit of a northerly component, and or the forward speed of these models slow down significantly. So it is not being steered by the Bermuda High and, ushered off to the west northwest at a very, rapid or, steady pace. So right now we're kind of, looking quote unquote 2 for 2. Now, we are going to take a look and compare this with the GEFS. The GEFS has very little signal out here for our first wave going out day 10, but has our non-tropical low running up here along the stalled out frontal boundary along the east coast. Now, again, we're going to jump out into absolute fairy tale land. Now, when we jump out into fairy tale land, we see that there is the possibility for some type of development, but again, there is a more northerly component on this. So, as we go through this upcoming week doing our lives at 6 p.m., we are going to watch for those long range trends to hold and to see if they remain consistent as what they're showing now. If that is the case, then as we get into an area of a little bit more skill and kind of out of the fantasy land portion of the models, we will at least know what the trends were coming into that. So it's always important to watch for your trends. You don't ever look at just one model. Now, if we compare all these with our Google DeepMind, and let me go back to day 0 and we'll zoom out a little bit. I was playing because I have concern for old Invest 99L, this cluster of shower and thunderstorm activity. I have concern for that, but not for the Atlantic, but as this continues out into the Eastern Pacific. And then I've got some concerns for folks there in coastal Mexico. But we'll get to that here in a little bit when we jump basins. So if we run our Google DeepMind out for the Atlantic Basin, there is our first wave. Now we're showing a signal here 7 days out. This is on September the 3rd in the afternoon hours. So we are going to put our forecast track on this. And if we look at the ensembles, just what the Google DeepMind is calling for is a steady pull to the north. Now, once we get this above, say, 25 degrees north, it is very susceptible to weakness in high pressure and troughs coming in to redirect it out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So right now, things are looking somewhat quiet. But now, I'm day 7. Remember what I said about that little cluster of shower and thunderstorms? Not everything is 100% clear with this one out here into the Eastern Pacific. This one could end up causing a considerable moisture surge into the southwestern portions of the United States, plus becoming a threat for the Baja Peninsula here. So it's certainly not a guarantee. We don't even have the storm in the Eastern Pacific yet, but it is going to be something to monitor, especially with some of the storms that we've seen recently there associated with the southwest monsoon over the last few days. All right, our nightly checkup on the Madden-Julian oscillation. Now, there is, if you guys have been watching consistently night by night, the last few runs, what we saw when the MJO got kind of caught up in this region is that we saw it kind of come back like this and then turn around and loop back out. Well, as more runs began to come through, we started to get a little bit of a progression with the MJO to where it got it out here towards kind of the end of phase three. Well, we keep seeing this consistent drop in, but the thing is now is that the very, very western edge of our propagation is now staying further. Let me draw the line right here. We're starting to get that propagation pushing further and further to the east, run by run. And we're starting to see maybe some results in some of the upper level winds. Now, if this were to potentially verify, that's going to change this. And it's potentially going to change it for the better to where these percentages for week 3 could lower. Now, what I have here is the GEFS, and this represents our 200 millibar velocity potential. All right, this is where we could see being at the 200 millibar level. Let me go get my graphic. We're right here. 200 millibar level. We're running at about 39,000, 40,000 feet up. All right, and what we're looking for here, the representation that we're seeking, is lower winds. Now, our lower winds will be represented by our blue and green values here, and more increased winds or velocity there would be represented by our orange and red colors. Well, when we get our Madden-Julian oscillation kind of coming through, when we look at these graphics, we can see that the more enhanced region is associated with this blue and green color. Well, when we look at these graphics, we read them in time going from the top to the bottom. And we know that the Madden-Julian oscillation moves from west to east. So as we go through, let me erase all this here. As we go through this graphic, what should occur is that the Madden-Julian oscillation should go something like this as it propagates from west to east. Now, to show everybody, we've got a small map down here at the very bottom of the screen that shows everybody where the more potentially conducive environment and the more potentially suppressive environment may take place. Now, if you notice that this area of reds, oranges, and stuff like that is right over the Atlantic Basin when we get to September 7th, 9th, and 11th. Now, if we look at what we're dealing with right now, it is a much more stronger suppressive phase over the Atlantic Basin, and we don't see any kind of tropical cyclone development. We do have a little bit of, weakness in some of these upper level winds associated with this kind of curl back right here, and then it loops back through and comes back around. So on this section right here, as it's rotating back, that is what this perceives to be. But then it tears out and goes over and potentially drops the more conducive environment for that week 3 for the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook. Now, I'm just reporting on what there is today. These models could obviously change tomorrow because they've been changing daily. If we compare that with the Euro upper level winds, I've pulled this one out tonight as well, because it is showing the almost exact same signal, with our suppression being here, potentially a small window, September 1st through September 5th or so, moving very quickly over the African maritime or the mainland, and then really amplifying over portions of the maritime regions and getting into potentially the Indian Ocean as well. Phase 3, phase 4, somewhere in kind of that area. But if we look here for the Atlantic, very similar to what we're seeing here. So there is some variability and some question as to what week 3 for the global tropics hazards outlook will look like when it becomes week 2. Does what I just showed you hold consistent? We don't know. Too early to tell. All right, we've got Earth Null, and Earth Null, real quick, I'm not going to go into it very much, but one thing that I do want to show everybody tonight is our areas off of the East Coast. So we've got an area of low pressure here, and we've got our trough. Let me come up to about the 500 millibar level, and that will kind of show what we're looking at. We've got our frontal boundary kind of in this region here. So I'm going to come down to the 850 millibar level, and I'm going to run this forward. This is on the GFS solution. And as you could tell, we get a couple areas of rotation and spin associated with that frontal boundary, but these are non-tropical in nature due to the fact that they hold frontal features. And tropical cyclone cannot have a frontal feature. But as we could see, there could be little areas of rotation and spin associated with our frontal boundary. As you can see, I will zoom in and get even closer to this, where a pretty significant cutoff line is, to where you have the high pressure behind it dominating with a clockwise flow around the high, and that air mass is colliding with the high pressure out here and the clockwise flow around that, and the two air masses meeting. And little eddies or areas of vorticity will want to spin up all along the little frontal boundary, because air is obviously interacting in two different directions, which likes to induce spin. Okay, our quick look at our nightly dust model. I am going to check. Uh-oh, Sammy's getting rain. No, Sammy. We're not dealing with what category 72 Sharknado canes? No. No, sorry. That is not on the models for this year. Please, no. We don't want, hell, I don't even want a category 2 hitting anybody this year. Much less category 72, which is not even a thing. But yeah, we'll roll with it. Sure. And as we could see with the overall dust model, we don't have much. And the 240 hour, knowing that we would potentially have that seed, what was being shown by the Euro, maybe a little bit of extra dust preceding that. Maybe the storm is a little bit too strong over land and helps to kick up some of that dust. And then that ends up out over the open waters before it has the opportunity to reach open waters. Okay, jumping out to the Eastern Pacific, we've got a whole bunch of stuff out here. We've got Tropical Storm Juliet, which should be off the board here in the near future, and a bunch of areas of interest highlighted by the National Hurricane Center. One in the Central Pacific that has a 20% chance of development. Those development percentages have been decreasing over the last couple days. We have another area. This has a 20% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 60% chance of development over the next 7 days. This is not going to impact land. This one here. This one is the one of concern. This one currently has a near 0% chance of development over the next 48 hours, and you would figure that would be almost impossible, being the fact that it is still currently over land. And it has a 30% chance of development over the next 7 days. I do expect some of those development percentages to go up, just looking at the amount of convection that is associated with our former Invest 99L area of showers and thunderstorms here, getting ready to kind of start to head in that general direction. Okay, a real quick look at Tropical Storm Juliet. As you can see, well away from land. Some of that moisture is streaming into the southwestern portions of the United States, although Juliet is just about over with. As you can see here, forecast within the next 24 hours, we may not have a single thing on the board tomorrow night, folks, other than the outlooks. We are currently located with Juliet at 23.9 north, 120.2 west, 45 mile an hour maximum sustained winds, moving north-northwest at 14 miles an hour with the minimum central pressure of 1,006 millibars. There are no coastal watches or warnings in effect and no hazards affecting land. If we take a look at its overall discussion, which we are not going to read, within the next 12 hours, maybe still containing tropical characteristics, but then by the 24-hour mark, by this time tomorrow night, it is forecast to become post-tropical or a remnant low. So, not much there. Looking out into the western Pacific, we have Invest 93W. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center has a low chance of development over the next 24 hours. Pagasa, or the Philippine Meteorological Service Agency, they have a high chance of development on Invest 93W over the next 24 hours. So we will definitely have to watch that. And just to kind of give folks an idea, this one is forecast to follow in the track, just looking here at Google DeepMind, following in the track of Kajiki that just hit Vietnam earlier. And as you can see, though, none of the models really get it very strong at all. But the last thing they need is more rain. They've had enough. Kajiki definitely dumped a considerable amount of rain over the region. They need the opportunity to dry out, and I'm afraid 1 week is just not going to be enough with the amount of rain that has fallen. All right, everybody, I am going to go ahead and sign off here for tonight. I don't see much for questions. So have a wonderful evening, everybody. We will be live again tomorrow night here at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central here on Facebook and YouTube. So until then, have a wonderful evening, everybody, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.